2 HEMA Saber videos in a row? Yeah. This one, however, might raise a few eyebrows among grognard purists for the rule set feature. Which is funny, because it's the most historical way to play this game. The dreaded right of way, famously invented by the evil moustache-twirling FIE in 1990 to sportify the ancient art of sword fighting into something car antenna tag. In reality, this is the fundamental set of assumptions most of the funny saber books are written about. Redelians are just point-in-line abusers with a big coupe. It's not that deep, guys. Going into the weeds about how and why right-of-way changes over time is a lot, but the TLDR, on my opinion, is I like modern foil over classical foil, but enjoy both, and really like classical saber over modern saber. For any modern guys watching, the basic difference is stepping forward or feinting doesn't mean anything by itself. It basically works the way bad foil coaches from the 70s tell you it works, but for real here. This is the final of the dual comp in Czechia between Miroslav Medved and Django Crow. Medved starts with complete control of the space for the first third or so of the match. After a couple of baits for the attack in prep, where he can't quite get his riposte off, he starts a march, but interestingly aborts with the arm as he lunges. Why? There's no way he actually makes this finish, so it's better to keep the arm in reserve. What he ends up doing here becomes a really fascinating little touch. Is this a remise, an attack in prep, or a broken time attack? It's kind of all three. Personally, I'd call it some kind of renewal. But what we see from a lot of the best renewals off the blade across fencing is that they are functionally attacks in preparation, inviting a tempo of compound development to renew the attack into. And in this particular one, also uses the refusal to bring the sword into presence to also have the advantages of a broken time attack. It's a really sick hit. Crow equalizes with a nice little step lunge feint attack. A cool thing for any developing fencers watching is note how he simply hits the target that happens to be in the right place at the finish of the attack. And because Medved pulls away, that happens to be his arm, but if he were to stay, it would likely be body. Medved gets another touch similar to the first one here. If we look at both these touches, it becomes clear that what he's exploiting is Crow's want to riposte complex or threaten a long attack after a distance parry. As such, he has nothing to lose from failing the initial lunge very shallow. He can always threaten the early remise and finish it if Crow insists on continuing a complex action. His next touch is actually slightly different. His renewals were abusing Crow's intention to step in and to start a compound action. Here it's getting him on his wanting to step in before the parry riposte. Stepping in on the parry isn't just okay, it's often a great decision, and particularly a good solution to close out a renewal. But the timing of it is important. Here, Crow wants to bring the body first in the parry. This works when the step in itself is part of the invitation, but from a slightly wider distance. But he already invited the attack with his stop, and it's too close. Earlier hand, or even slightly smaller step, and he probably gets this away. Even when Crow gets the opportunity to attack, his insistence on preparing a feint by chamber leads directly to being attacked into preparation, because Medved can know for sure whenever Crow starts his lunge, he can attack into it. Medved's next touch, by contrast, has a very real feint into space that forces Crow to respond and give him the time to finish. Now you might notice it's a pretty one-sided score right now, but what's cool about this match is it does not stay that way. The next touch is Crow's, and here's a very slight change. So attack is slightly pulled, so when it gets parried, there's space for the returning parry. Cool, nothing crazy. But the change here can be seen on the riposte. It's still indirect, but no unnecessary chambering. No broken time feint, it's just an extension by cut into a new line. Medved can no longer attack into this one. By the way, from a fencing theory perspective, chambering the cut is just a broken time feint or coupe. If you are a HEMA Sabre or side sorter, I'd recommend understanding that for making your fencing more effective. We see a similar change in this attack. Much like his previous successful compound, Crow here doesn't pull the sword back before his opponent is occupied in tempo. Last time, it was indirect to the arm off a foot feint. Here it's a classical feint and coupe, but he's not holding the arm unnecessarily. And that makes these touches more believable than those compound riposte preparations, even when he doesn't use the classical feint. Indeed, if you watch his next touch, you'll see he's starting to step back on the parry, which also closes out Medved's forced malparry option. Now, this channel typically talks about the spatial and proactive tactics inherent to fencing, but so far both these fencers have been very happy to fence at cooperative distances. So we mostly see changes in the use of tempo within roughly the same spaces. Of course, tempo is itself an expression of distance because space and time are the same thing, but for a 10-minute YouTube video and for a lot of fencing conversations, we can separate them as schema. Anyway, this touch by Medved here is probably the first solution done with a change of distance tactics. Crow's change to indirect and conventional compounds riposte was good, but he's now finishing a simple 1-2 almost every attack. Medved switched to a pull short here, perfectly exploits Django's attack now being shortened, and it's a nice parry riposte. However, the slightly widened space also plays into Crow's hand in the next touch. Here, Medved's slightly broken time attack is just starting a little too far out, and it makes it easier for Crow to hold off the parry till he sees the real commitment. Crow doesn't do anything tricky with the feet here, he simply holds the space for when the attack is inevitably delivered. Crow then gets another attack away. He directly pressures Medved's recovery, can see there's nothing on immediately, so uses a simple coupe to draw out the parry and finish. Note that the feint is particularly believable here because it's an attack into recovery, which are very commonly simple. However, a similar attempt here doesn't work. Crow pretty much goes when Medved tells him to. Ironically, a more eyes open step lunge maybe works here. But realistically, similar to Crow's own riposte 2 touches ago, he goes when Medved simply invites with a foot, from quite far, and Crow gets pulled out completely. Crow then uses a similar step lunge in roughly the same space to invite here. After an initial foray forward, he invites Medved to move. Crow steps in, the space no longer reads as part of a compound attack but an opportunity to finish, so Medved sends out a simple attack, and Crow just does roughly about enough to get the parry and riposte away. This next compound is great, mostly because Crow goes as Medved decides to go forward. After an aborted first attempt, he even makes sure Medved is moving the front foot and wants to develop an attack. So even though the distance is a tad long, the forward commitment is more than the typical shuffle a preparatory pull tends to find. Medved is betrayed a little by his shoe slipping, but the timing would have always made this hard. Going forward with as much as intent as he had means he has to parry, and his retreat will be slow. This touch is, I think, a really good example of a nice invitation of the forward movement for your own attack in HEMA right of way. However, remember how I mentioned Crow will continuously follow through on the step lunge once he decides on it? It bites him at the end here. Right off the on-guard lines here, Medved is just happy to drift to keep space, wait for the step lunge to start, and steal the attack in prep because he knows the attack will come. And it will be compound. For any modern guys watching, this is an attack in prep in most HEMA right of way. It's borderline, but it starts before the genuine attempt to hit. The entire finish of this match is that Medved has started to be able to recognize very consistently when Crow's step lunge is starting, and just weighing up, can he get the attack and prep away, or should he pull Crow short? The latter is applied here, and the former for the final touch, because Crow pretty much always attacks by step lunge, with the most contextual decision making once he decides to attack typically being just exactly what he does with a sword. These are now incredibly simple decisions for Medved. Crow had enough variation to keep it difficult, but his lack of variation or adaptability in the feet of his attack meant that once Medved could find that step, once he could find the way into that step, he had the match. If you would like to watch another Saber match, there's this one I just made very recently. I would also recommend maybe taking a look at this match between two of the best rapierists in the world, Woody Craig and Rob Childs.